Hello, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. And in the meantime, if you want to say hello in the chat, then go ahead. You can introduce yourselves. We're just going to give 2 or 3 minutes for everyone to come in before we get started.
Could I just ask, will we be getting the presentation sent to us, or do we need to make notes?
No, we'll send them out.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. So hello to people who've just arrived in the last 30 seconds. We're just waiting for everyone to get in. There's all kinds of really interesting and skillful people in the group. So feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. I know people have different etiquette about using the chat during the webinar. I'm completely cool with you having your own conversations in the chat with whoever you find on there. It's fine. Don't feel like you need to keep quiet. That's fine. Go for it. And if you want to put questions in the chat as we go along, if you start them with a Q so we can pick them out more easily at the end. I'm just going to wait like 1 more minute and then we'll get started. Hey, I'm going to start. So I'm Jade. Hello, everyone. Jade Bashford. I work for the Real Farming Trust. For those who, I've already said this once before, but I know people are joining, so I'm going to say it again. So we've got really interesting participants on the session, as well as some great speakers. So feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves, and feel free to chat away in the chat whilst other people are speaking if you wanted to. That'd be great. That'd be fine. We're going to go on for an hour and a half if we're really strict and keep to time, or if we don't, we'll have a break in the middle and we'll be done no more than two hours at the most. So hopefully we'll get done in an hour and a half because we'll be strict with the time. So this session we're going to talk about food for asylum seekers, migrants and refugees. Yeah, I work for the Real Farming Trust, so we're a little charity concerned with agroecology, but also with social justice around food. And one of the things we do is run programs of work. Some of that's delivery work and some of it's research work attached to it. And out of that, we try and influence good practice or share good practice of the things that have come up for us. So this is a reason for that. And we're not particularly expert on this question, but there are other people in the room who really are. So that's how it's come about. So 2 of the people involved in the partnership program that we've been doing are on the CAWR. That's CAWR and Edinburgh Cyrenians. So the project we've just been doing was about ready meals on a huge scale to address social justice around food with some social engagement around it. And CAWR from Coventry University returned to social impact with that piece of work. And that was lottery funded, community funded. So this webinar's come out of that. There are other webinars that we've done, and there's one tomorrow, which is about photo voice. Jas, do you want to tell us really quickly about the one tomorrow, the webinar tomorrow?
Sure. Just yeah. So it's without giving too much away, it's a little training unpacking together around photo voice. And photo voice is a creative research method, and that can be used with community groups to help document the kind of lives they're having and the stories that they want to tell. So it's a creative way of using photography to tell the stories that communities want to tell.
Thanks, Jas. Right, so that's tomorrow, and you'll find a link to book onto that if you want to there on that website. And so this is one of a series. We've done one on advocacy, so people speaking out about their experiences when they've needed food support, and one on a toolkit, sort of how to make ready meals or how to deal with food and so on. And there's other resources on that website, and we will share the slides, everybody's slides, at the end. Also, I'm going to put in the chat, I'll put Sarah's email address. I think probably quite a lot of you in the room have got other really good resources to share. So if you've got recipe books or reports or anything like that that you want to share with the group that you'd like us to email out, you can send them to Sarah and we'll share those as well. And if everyone agrees to the recording, we'll put the recording on that website there. Oh, it won't change. Here we go. Oh, let's go back up again. Going too fast. Yeah, so just a reminder to anyone who's joined, we're going to have questions at the end, not after each speaker. So put your questions in the chat and Sarah will pick them out for us. And if you start, if you're putting a question rather than a comment, put Q at the start so we can pick them out more easily from all the other chat. And we're recording. Hope that's okay with everyone. So we've done that bit. So here are the speakers today, and they'll go in this order. So we've got Jasber Singh from Coventry University, who we've worked with already to do photo voice with us on another project. And he's particularly interested in this client group with a lot of experience. So he's going to talk about the different kinds of legislation affecting different groups, that people come with quite different rights and resources. So he'll introduce that for 10 minutes. Anusree will talk about the sort of overview of the kinds of issues that people are facing around food. I'll talk briefly about the food issues themselves and where to find information about health and safety, insurance, those kind of technical issues around food. Lukman's going to talk about what they're doing in the Jollof Cafe in Brighton. So he's going to give some practical examples. And then if it works, fingers crossed, we'll have a video that Nura made from Edinburgh Cyrenians. So they're the speakers. If we're on time, we'll carry straight on then and go into small groups, because I know there's loads of really brilliant people in the room. We'd like you to be able to talk to each other and meet each other. And then right at the end, we'll have questions and a whole group coming back together. So that's what's going to happen. I've got just a summary of all the issues that we want to cover. You won't be able to read all this lot, but we'll share the slides. So before we did the webinar, we had conversations with quite a lot of different people to try and summarize what the issues are if you're new to this kind of work. So these are just things to look out for as people are speaking. So first of all, like Jazz is going to say, there's different kinds of conditions that people are trying to deal with. But if you've met somebody who has got refugee status already, they'll have quite different resources to somebody who's undocumented, for example. The second point that people came out with from the discussions was that your food space needs to become trauma-informed, that you'll be dealing with people who have had, in some cases, extremely difficult experiences, and they'll bring that into the room. So trying to create a safe space or be aware of that in your cafe or whatever you're doing will help. Food needs to be culturally appropriate, of course, but if you think you know what halal food is, you probably haven't got everyone covered. So the advice was to chat to people and see what works for them. Translation's tricky, of course, everyone said that. You might find people who are coming in who will translate for you. You need to deal with that in the case of sort of labeling allergens and that kind of stuff. And the other piece of advice that came out was to be aware of the kind of social needs and cultural needs, not just nutrition, that giving people a chance to eat together, to make food that they know from home, to have a kitchen or a speaking space is often valued at least as much as the food itself. Another thing that came out was an opportunity for some of you, depending on what you're doing, to influence relationships with local people who might not otherwise have many opportunities to understand the issues or to meet new people, and to be aware, of course, about the perceptions or misperceptions of the people already using your project if you invite new kinds of people in. There was an alert to be afraid that some people will be very nervous about deportation and maybe won't have a good grip about what kinds of things put them at risk and what don't. So they might be very cautious about giving their name when they come or that kind of thing. And then finally, of course, if you're new to food work, there's a whole load of issues around dealing with food and keeping it safe and how you source surplus food cheaply and so on that you need to be aware of. So that's kind of a summary of all the kinds of things we're going to cover to look out for as we go along. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing now and I'm going to hand over to Jazz to introduce himself and then do his 10-minute slot. Thanks, Jazz.
Okay, thank you. Just going to share my screen. Give me 2 seconds. Shared very easily, obviously, in the test, and now it's just there we go. You can see that, I guess. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you, Jade, and for the Real Farming Trust for inviting me to speak on this. It's a real pleasure, and it's great to be amongst a really nice group of very experts, I think, experts in their field. So it'd be really nice to just kind of unpack this together. Okay, so I'm going to be speaking to the theme of supporting migrants and for people who are seeking their international right to asylum. So I was asked to talk about the different rights, but sadly I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to focus in on one group, and that is people who are seeking their international right to asylum, and it'll become more clear why I focused in on that group as we go forward. Okay, so my name is, I forgot to tell everybody my name. So my name is Jasber Singh. I work at the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience at Coventry University. It's a real mouthful, and we kind of make. Okay, just to give a bit of context, because I'm quite interested in the right to food, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But just very quickly, just to set the context, why is food support so important? I think it's very obvious, but I just wanted to point it out that in the Food for You and the Family Resource Survey that happens every year, and you can get those results every year by the Department of Work, by the agency. It shows that food insecurity is a real problem. The consumer survey showed that 31% was worried, and the Food Foundation showed that 17% of the population were food insecure. So this has given rise to a range of different food banks. One of the things I just want to flag right now is that food banks and solidarity kitchens are really, really important, but a lot of people think that this is putting a plaster on a wound, a deeper wound. So increasing the amount that you receive through work, so increasing, strengthening the terms and conditions, a living wage, and increasing the amount of you receive from universal credit has been seen as a much more stronger structural response to food insecurity. But the thing I want to flag up right now is that that won't address food insecurity for all groups, different reasons, but it won't support these three mechanisms here. These three mechanisms won't support food insecurity for people who are seeking their international right to asylum. And I'll make that more clear as we go forward. So international right to seek asylum in Fortress Europe is become very difficult. And this is why some people are describing Europe more as Fortress Europe. And as you know, in Britain, it's not separate to Europe, but obviously has its own set of laws and its own set of histories on immigration. It's made seeking your international right to asylum much more harder. And one of the ways it does that is through the exclusion of public funds and work, which are part of the broader hostile environment. So I'm just going to focus in on that condition now, public funds. So the immigration condition, no recourse to public funds, which I'll talk a bit more about in a moment to give it a definition. So no recourse to public funds is a immigration condition that affects all migrants, and it was operated through, arguably the first, it was first uttered and introduced, although there's some debate about when it was first introduced. Some say it was uttered in the Alien Act in 1904, but something where it started to become more clear was the 1971 Immigration Act. The hostile environment, which came in, which was operationalized. So the hostile environment by Theresa May, that was operationalized in the 2014-2016 Immigration Act. And part of that was, again, was to strengthen this idea of no funds. The hostile environment increases the powers to monitor migrants, but he also subjects people who are seeking their international right to asylum to existing pressures. So what is no recourse to public funds? So we've got an idea of how it was introduced in terms of immigration policy, but it actually is quite a profound piece of immigration legislation. And I think the profound nature of it, I don't think we've all fully grasped. I think it has such a profound implication. So no recourse to public funds excludes most migrants from most social security benefits. So that includes tax credits, council housing, local authority homeless assistance, and universal credits as well. It is most people subject to immigration control. And that includes people who migrate to work, to study, to visit, to join family, and people who are seeking the international right to asylum. It also applies to people who overstay their visa and quote unquote undocumented migrants. So people who overstay the visa and undocumented migrants, they by default have no recourse to public funds. Citizens Advice Bureau, it's very hard to get a figure around this, but approximately 1.4 million people in the country are subjected to the immigration condition, no recourse to public funds. But it's really important to kind of attach it to different groups. So all migrants are subjected to no recourse to public funds. And I give this example, my boss is actually subjected to no recourse to public funds. So he cannot access universal credit and so on and so forth. Decent universal salaries. So it affects some people more than others. So for example, people are subjected to people who are seeking the international right to asylum, who are also subjected to immigration controls. They're excluded, obviously, from social security, which has a massive impact. And I'll talk about that impact in a moment. So that impact shows up in a range of different issues. One of these is food insecurity. So if you look at food bank figures, and this is the Trust of Trust, and it's quite old data now, and it's probably a lot worse, is that people who seek asylum overrepresented at food banks. And the figure is obviously different in local areas. While this figure is 3% in local areas, it can be up to 40 to 50% depending on your local area. But nonetheless, the key message is it's disproportionate. So the number of households is 0.1%, but in some areas it can be up to 50%, 40%, 30%. So it's highly disproportionate. So no recourse to public funds is operated through the asylum support system. So that is the Asylum Act 1999, and I won't go into the details. So somebody who's seeking asylum has just recently gone up, it's eligible to £47.39 a week. And then that's different for catering and self-catering. So the amount is actually very small. The amount is very small. And it's very hard to live on. I mean, it's quite a complex legal landscape because there are some caveats. For example, Section 17 of the 1918 Children's Act. So if a household has a child, then the rights of the child supersedes the Immigration Acts, and there is a way to get extra resources into a household because of the Children's Act and the rights of the child. So there's always a complex picture, but without children, it's actually a really difficult situation, and with children, it's a very, very difficult situation when you think about the amounts that people receive. So what that basically means is that the immigration condition, no recourse to public funds, has a profound impact on food, accommodation, clothing, heating, and all kinds of general costs. Importantly as well, in terms of in the food narratives, people who are subjected to no recourse to public funds are also excluded from Healthy Start vouchers. And until very recently, until COVID, actually, until the pandemic, even also were seen as a public fund, which they are obviously, but people who would normally meet the thresholds of poverty were excluded from that. That has changed now. And the reason I kind of mentioned that, there is little political and policy maneuver on this no recourse to public funds. What also shows up with people who are seeking the international right to asylum is that the accommodation is often poor, damp, mold, and also a lack of cooking facilities as well. Often houses are multiple occupancy, so it's actually quite a problematic space to live. It's also very gendered as well, and I think that gets missed in the narratives. And that the gender dimension shows up in all kinds of things in terms of domestic violence, but also around the kind of looking after children and the extra labor and the extra cost of that as well. So I think that's really important to kind of mention that the rights that are transgressed through people who seek the international right to asylum are also gendered as well. And even those gender rights are protected, there's still a gendered impact. So one of the ways we've tried to think about the food insecurity that people face in the UK more generically is something called the right to food, because it's difficult to change immigration policies because of the way the immigration debate is happening in the UK, particularly for people who are seeking the international right to asylum, and how no recourse to public funds causes a range of causes poverty, destitution, and food insecurity. So one way to kind of curb the excesses of immigration policies to have something like the right to food. So while we're looking at the rights and how they're different in terms of food insecurity and destitution and poverty, we're also thinking about what rights do we need to introduce to ensure that food insecurity and poverty and destitution become something of the past. And one of those is to introduce more social, cultural, and economic rights, such as the right to food. And there's a policy paper that Coventry University have done that you can read that discusses the right to food in the UK a bit more. But this is really interesting, right? So potentially we could have a right to food, but that doesn't guarantee that that will apply to all individuals. So for example, if you see on this slide here, the policy narrative is that if you increase you increase income levels, and then that would have an impact on food banks. That will reduce the number of food banks, reduce the usage of food banks, sorry. But what you see on the other model is, oh gosh, this hasn't quite worked, never mind. Oh yeah, there we go. What you see here is that if you do introduce a right to food as a policy, no recourse to public funds, exclusion from work and social security would still apply even if you had a right to food legislation. So you couldn't increase levels from universal credit. So what that shows is that even having a strong rights model, a right to food model, if no recourse to public funds still holds, which I think it would, because sadly immigration policy is so powerful in terms of the electorate, what we would have is a right to food model that wouldn't still work. It wouldn't work in reality. So that brings another question about rights, and that who has the rights to have rights? And that sounds very complicated, but it's actually a real thing that actually happens. So this is Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt on the persecutions of Jews in the 1930s and 1940s. Started to think about who has rights and who doesn't have rights. And sadly, that kind of idea still applies today. So rights are generally a relationship between the state and the citizens. So people who are seeking their international right to asylum aren't classified and categorized as citizens. So they don't have rights to have rights. Hence why they would be excluded. So we have a deeper conversation that we need to have as well. Who has the rights to have rights? And people who have the rights to have rights are citizens, and people who are seeking the international right to asylum don't have that category of being a citizen. And no recourse to public funds can last up to 10 years. So you could, and can be even longer. So you have this period you don't have rights to have. Important message that we need to get across when we think about international rights about seeking asylum. And the reason I keep deliberately saying the international right to seek asylum, it is an international right, but those international rights are eroded by the British state through things like no recourse to public funds, not having the right to work, and not having the right to education, which all applies to people.
Jazz, you're short of time.
Okay, so the quick message is, oh gosh, I've gone to 14, sorry, Jade. So a quick message is we might need to think about abolishing immigration policies and developing practice together to work through this very complex question around rights and not having rights. And you can touch upon some of these issues through these kind of publications here as well. Right, I'm going to shut up because I went way over time. Sorry about that.
A little bit over time, a little bit over time. That was great, thank you. I think we did need to hear all of that. That was a very good introduction to all the things that we need to think about. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for bringing such a high level of expertise to it, Jazz. That's brilliant. And you can share those documents, you know, Sarah will mail them out to everyone if you want to give them to her. I'll put Sarah's email address in the chat. Okay, so we're going to go on to Anusree now. and she's going to talk about the general issues with food for people in these situations. Thanks, Anusree. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and your project as well. 10 minutes, mind. You're muted.
I put my time on and I took
Put your time on.
Sorry, and I took myself off mute. So okay. Hi, my name is Anusree Biswas Sasidharan, and I'm one of the directors of Bridging Change. And I was just going to give you a snapshot of some work and research that we did in Brighton and Hove, which covered migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. But it was a much broader report. But I'm just going to focus on that today. Oh, let me see if I can. Next page. All right. So basically, it was a research that was conducted last year and into this year, and it was done with my co-director, Nura, and we conducted research. We did focus groups and interviews and questionnaires just to get as much information from communities within Brighton and Hove. And you can get the report. You can link when you get the presentation, you can press on that link and see the report because it's very detailed. It has, I think, 18 recommendations that you can have a look at. And we work with our partners at the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership, and Brighton and Hove funded it. Sorry, that's my bit done there. So first of all, actually, before I get to that, basically, we had a sort of a broad remit and looking at the experiences of Black, Asian, minoritized communities. And it was a real eye-opener for the council and also white-led projects who were really interested in having a look at how things are working. We worked primarily with food establishments who were either Black-led, or they were working with predominantly Black, Brown, and minoritized ethnic communities. Okay, so some of the challenges that we noticed were things that you will all be familiar with if you're working within food access and food justice, and that's about the sort of difficulty in transport. So it can be difficult depending where you live in Brighton, and it can also mean that you might not have affordable shops near you. Also around childcare and caring responsibilities, physical immobility, digital exclusion, and the policy that Jazz mentioned earlier around, about access to services, no children, no food, which is what some of the people faced when going to food banks. And of course, the pressure in the system, which I really like the way that you termed that, Jazz, around the needing of a stronger structural response. I think that resonated with me very strongly. But of course, we have to look at what are sort of what we can influence. So what we did also look at is additional barriers for migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. So a lot of people were unaware of services beyond the one they were accessing. So if anything failed, which did happen, where there was a strain on the particular service, who were unable to provide services to people, say, particularly if they didn't have children, they weren't always aware of what was available outside. So it was that navigating of systems really difficult for individuals. Also, there were encouragement from some mainstream services who might say, actually, you might want to go and try someone else. So they were sometimes turned away inadvertently because it was seen as not appropriate. Maybe they were trying to help, so they're saying, have a look at this service, but they were actually closing a door to that individual. It was quite significant, the lack of cultural awareness of some food banks. And so some of them were totally inappropriate approaches to speaking to people, working with people, making people feel welcome. Language barriers, of course, as well known. But as I mentioned earlier, this idea of navigating systems, looking at a new support system, something very unfamiliar to people, sometimes made it very difficult for people to access food or know what was available. And of course, very sort of common as well is around feelings of isolation. So this is actually two pictures of food that people actually got in the asylum hotel. And it is just, it looks dreadful, and it was something they just couldn't bear. And sometimes it was cold. It wasn't familiar food. It might have been for one group, but even they were embarrassed to say that this had anything to do with their cultural heritage. They didn't recognize it as food that they would eat. It was very limited in nutrition. People felt very dependent on aid. It was people felt so, you know, sorry, the word has left me, but they felt very out of control, unable to control their own fate. But that's to do with the general system around there. And also the food was inappropriate for children, not culturally sensitive, although they have tried to change it. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not, but a lot of the time it's not what people want. And that is made worse by the fact that, you know, they often have no use to a kitchen, no microwaves, no cookers and freezers. So some of the comments, I'll just read a few briefly, but that came from the hotels specifically, that the problem, so one of the quotes are, the problem is that food is not good and they give it cold and it makes many of us sick in the stomach. So sometimes there were spices that weren't something they were familiar with, and it was actually making them ill, physically ill. There were several times we didn't eat. They just couldn't do that, and we don't want to eat that food because we sick it with our stomach. So that's really common. People actually, it's a real physical response to finding the food difficult. The lack of microwaves, we can't use a microwave, is not allowed. No kitchen instruments, and there is conversations. We have met with people at the hotel several times, but they say the food can't be changed, and that's to do with, you know, contractual sort of agreements with the hotel. So very frustrating. So there's a lot around the food making them ill. So I just wanted to give you a couple of case studies. One was BMECP, which is a really interesting and lovely space. It was a sort of it's been around for several years, and it's a Black racialized minority space, which was very new to food distribution, which started during COVID. And what people really liked about this space specifically was that it was a warm and accessible, friendly, non-judgmental approach to supporting people. So they felt that they didn't have to fill in forms when they came in, or very few forms. It didn't feel like they needed a referral. They didn't need a referral. They came in, they felt very welcome. And I think that was really important to the approach they had. They listened and they learned. So they didn't get things right the first time either. So they were very responsive to what people wanted. So they were looking and asking questions around religious periods and understanding, okay, around Eid, for instance, they might consider more sugar or more oil in the diet because it was part of the tradition. And that was really well sort of received from people who were using the services. You can read more detail about who uses it, but that was pretty much minoritized ethnic people using it. Another one, quite different. So Hollandbury Food Bank, which was a sort of a white-led organization. They did have a woman of color who was a food bank coordinator. And that was really helpful in their approach to understanding how to be quite an inclusive bank. And they had taken the approach of being an taking an anti-racist approach, which is very proactively looking at how to address Black and racialized minority communities. So it was really good. That received between 30 to 40% of people using their food banks. So it was really well received. Again, they learnt from what people asked for. They were listening and they were sourcing it according to things like chapati flour, coconut milk, as I've mentioned there, lentils, chickpeas, cooking oil, and they started to grow their understanding. And again, that was really well appreciated. Also, quite significantly, they used vouchers instead of giving food, which was also well received. We had, as I said, several recommendations. I'm just going to mention a few of them here, but please do look at our report. It'll be a link that you can link on, and you can see the sort of things that have happened. So things like, you know, talking about making spaces, cooking facilities. Now, I didn't mention one of our colleagues who's going to speak later, Lukman, who will talk about the Jollof Cafe, who are amazing. When you'll hear it, you'll know. So that's why I've not spoken about them. But really the importance about cooking facilities and helping people feel comfortable and having food that they recognize and feel and are proud of. You know, really important having those spaces around microwaves, cookers, fridge, freezers, you know, things around snacks. Sometimes that's not thought of. So really, really important. I'll just jump through because I know time is going through really quickly. Something around referral systems, thinking about how we do that, and clear signposting. I'm just going to go through recommendation 6 really briefly. There's a need for, obviously organisations to look at becoming more culturally sensitive, so people can feel they can access their services. Looking at how we can provide additional support, which I know is difficult. So, for instance, BMECP would make phone calls and reminders, and they grew that rapport and understanding and understood what was going on. And also, it's helpful when people aren't coming as well, so you can manage that food. I'm just going to jump through. As I said, this will be shared, so you can have a look at it. So other recommendations are around creating a space of sanctuary for people that they feel happy to be there, and there are other things going on if it's possible, because it's not always possible. Having things like low-cost cafes and other activities that are sort of really a wonderful asset. Also consider giving vouchers, as I mentioned before. It gives the people a sense of empowerment around what they buy and where they buy from. I just wanted to say that we have had some great responses from the actual report. So we've been able to implement many of the recommendations. Actually, not me, myself, our colleagues at the council and the voluntary sector have been really proactive. So I've shown on the slide in this sort of graphic here, there's sort of an easy, not an easy read, but a plain English version of a leaflet to navigate the system, which has also been translated so people can have a look at how to navigate some of these systems. So there's been about 10 languages that it's been translated to, so people can see, because actually they don't need to know the details of, they just need to know where to go. And on this, there's like a code that they can use on their phones if they have an accessible phone, which allows them to go for a translation of what they need, or a service. So there's lots of different things that can be done. Also, quickly, 2 local universities. One of the issues that were brought up was around some of the students, foreign students who are struggling with, because of the cost of living, struggling to access food, who are using it, and they've started to address some of those issues. And as I said, the creation of the materials that I've mentioned here to explain the pathways. Yeah, I think that's just a real quick whistle-stop sort of explanation of what we've been doing. But please do read the report, and you can come to us with any questions, and those are our details.
Oh, that was absolutely spot on. Thank you so much. That was really perfectly presented for us. And that report, I think, will be just right for people who are beginning this kind of work. What really struck me about that, as you were talking, Anusree, was the importance of the social aspects of the work, people's confidence, people's knowledge, making a relationship, having a dialogue, because you don't know what to do, so you have a conversation and change what you do. That aspect of it, I think, is so it's so nice to hear that so clearly put. All right, so I'm going to talk just for a couple of minutes now, really aimed at people who are already working with this client group but are new to food. I think we've probably got in amongst the participants groups who are really brilliant at working with food and are wondering how to reach out to this client group for the first time. And we've also got people who are really good at working with this client group who are new to doing things for food. So I'll just talk about the food side of it. And when we get into small groups, I think there'll be some really good opportunities to swap understanding between those 2 different networks. I'm not going to talk in too much detail because we've already done a webinar about this, about all the nitty-gritty issues of dealing with food. I'm just trying to share my screen, which isn't working. Hang on, I need to just faff around to share my screen. It's not going as I hoped it would. If I do that, yeah, I think it'll work. Hang on. Yeah. All right. So I've put the website address for this, and there's quite a lot of different resources on that website already. So there's one on nutrition, for example, there's one on using surplus food, and so on. One of the things on there is a toolkit, which is aimed at groups who are new to making ready meals or meals. And it covers all the boring nitty-gritty stuff in very simple language that you need to know. There's a webinar also on the website where we've talked through this and given some examples of it. So on this, in this toolkit, which is free, and you can share it with other groups, you can download it and share it around, print it out if you need to do. It's got a whole load of sheets about registering as a food business, about labelling for nutrition and allergens, about how to keep safe with health and safety, make sure you're not prosecuted if someone gets sick, about how to source surplus food and so on. So if you're new to dealing with food, just download the toolkit or have a look at the webinar, and I don't need to read it all out. I wanted to mention just briefly that if you don't know it already, there are organisations who are very well equipped to supply cheap or free food. I mean, there's a whole load of issues about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And obviously, people should not be requiring surplus food, and we shouldn't be supporting food industry creating surplus food. But it's out there, so there are organisations like FareShare or Felix in London, or sometimes smaller scale community networks who are very good at sourcing surplus food, which you can access for free or cheap. It might not be culturally appropriate, you might not get much choice about what turns up, but if you need cheap or free food for your projects, it's out there. And there are community, I mean, there's a whole network, if you don't know it already, of really superb community food organisations who you can speak to if you're beginning to work with food, and they'll support you in how to get hold of food or how to cook or where the nearest community kitchen is or that kind of thing. And there are some more interesting ways of sourcing food. So, for example, there are projects, including one in Bristol that works with a refugee kitchen, where they pair a community farm or somebody who's already selling direct to the public, and then they ask their customers to buy another one for someone that needs it. So the box scheme customer, for example, buys one for themselves, but they pay double, and the other box goes to someone that needs it. And then that community farm pairs the refugee kitchen, and the refugee kitchen receives the food, and they're good at distributing it. So there are all kinds of models like that out there. And if you're new to dealing with food, I'd encourage you to tap into your community food networks, or to talk to me, and I'll try and signpost you to someone who will have expertise about getting involved with food. I think that's all I need to say, because all the interesting thing I've got to say is on the website already, and I don't need to talk you through it. So the website is the Real Farming Trust, and you need to look on the page that's Programmes, Ready Healthy Eat, and we'll share that, and it's also in the chat. Okay, so we're going to go on to Lukman now, who's going to give a case study and talk about the fantastic work he's been doing with this project. I'll let you introduce yourself, Lukman.
Thank you very much.
You've got 10 minutes, only 10 minutes.
I'll try to keep to time. Hello, everyone. My name is Lukman Onukwusi. I'm originally from Nigeria. So the Love Cafe started around 2016, 2017, thereabout, but it didn't just start like that. It started with a group of people who were concerned about hostile environment that was already mentioned before in the presentation by the earlier speaker, and the group was called Brighton Migrant Solidarity, and there were lots of concern around that time how hostile environment has affected issues around the health, access to health service, to legal aid, to immigration case not being resolved, to access to education, to housing, to lack of funds, which is no recourse to public fund that was mentioned earlier, and leading to destitution among precarious migrants and refugees and asylum seekers. And on top of that, you have social isolation, which was very significant and very dreadful features of the hostile environment, because the aim of the hostile environment is to isolate people and to forcibly make them think that they can take voluntary return back to the country which they come from. Okay, so when we were meeting as Brighton Migrant Solidarity, there were lots of issues that were going on, but we also noticed there were lack of representation of refugees and asylum seekers and precarious migrants representing themselves and saying exactly what they feel about this problem and how they want to fashion a solution to this problem, or what they think as a solution to this problem. So we thought that the way to bring people together were to raise some awareness about with the few migrants and refugees that we know, to through word of mouth, to see if we can have a meeting of refugees and asylum seekers and precarious migrants to come together and then come to talk about this issue around hostile environment. And when we did, we were successful to do that. And one of the issues which was raised was social isolation and destitution and lack of funds, and also legal aid in terms of trying to resolve their issue. But at the core of that, they thought that the way we could come together is to have something to do every week, to give us somewhere to go and something to do. And we thought food was a very good element to do that, not just because we want to eat food, but because we thought it's gonna be a unifying factor between us and the host community. By cooking food of our country of origin, which is very significant to holding on to our culture, because we can use that as a way of saying this is a token of us, and you can try it and see how it tastes, and you can try new thing, and you give us a token of donation. And that token of donation, because we don't put price on our food, we have a suggested price tag, which is minimum of £5. And if anyone can give more than that, that's welcome. If someone don't have money at all, they can also eat at Jollof Cafe. So basically, the money that we get goes into our destitution funds, and that pocket of destitution fund help us to break the cycle of destitution for people who need money. And also we use that avenue. I need to mention, before we set up Jollof Cafe, we call ourselves Success Refugee and Migrant Self-Support Group. Basically, we see ourselves as precarious migrants, people with precarious immigration status who need to come together to support each other and to win our right to remain in the community that is already our home. So through food, using the avenue of using food, we are able to get money to fund some people who could not get legal aid, to pay for their immigration case matter, and through other fundraising as well. I need to add to that. But that venue, Jollof Cafe, now become a conveyance, or how do I say it, convergence center, where different organizations now come to meet people that need their services, like Refugee Radio, who help people in finding solicitors, as well as helping them with other case matters like housing and access to, or challenging their non-recourse to public fund, for instance. And we also work with another charity who help people. We signpost another charity when people come to us to seek help, as well as eat with us, to say if they're having a housing problem, then we signpost them to a charity called 1000 for 1000, who help them with providing accommodation for them at no cost to them. And yeah, that's the summary of Jollof Cafe and what we do, basically. Thank you very much.
I'm so grateful that you shared that with us. That was very good to hear. And I guess what I'm noticing about it is that you've built up over a long time, and that you've really used networks in the city of other organisations who have got resources and skills to share, which I guess is a good learning for for everyone to do that, and maybe to reach out with organisations who are not like yours also, to share resources and learn some more is really good. And I guess the other thing that came into my mind is that in some, particularly in cities, there's loads of work going on already in very well established support groups, and in other places there's absolutely nothing, either in food or support for migrants and asylum seekers and refugees. And so it's really very varied what expertise or what existing networks there are. And so I guess I'd like to recommend to people who are working in places like Brighton, where there is a lot of food work and several organisations who have this kind of expertise with these groups, to look out for more rural areas or smaller towns where there's nothing going on. I think the expertise is not well spread around the UK. Okay, so just to see where we are on the map, we've got, if they're going to work, fingers crossed, we've got 2 short videos from Nura in Edinburgh. After that, we'll go on to small groups. What time is it? Yeah, I think we can just about make it. I think we won't have a break. So if you need to pop off for a break, do, because I think we will be done in an hour and a half in total. So we'll have 2 short videos from Nura if they work. Then we'll go into small groups, and then we'll come back to a whole group, and we'll be done in an hour and a half. So I'm not going to stop for break. So if you need one, then just pop off and come back. That'll be completely fine. Sarah, do you want to see if you can make the videos work first? And if not, then I'll have a go.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and Sue, do you want to say hello and introduce the videos briefly? Are you there, Sue?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello,
Sorry,
Sue.
just
Hello,
doing
Sue.
the buttons. And I was sitting here thinking as well, is I wonder whether I can play them off my phone, and at least we might hear her voice. So I was thinking of that as a plan B. So before that, I'm Sue. I work for the Cyrenians here in Edinburgh. We are predominantly but a homelessness charity. We work with people who are suffering the causes and consequences of homelessness, and I work on the food education side. But Nura, who you'll hear from, she came to us first of all in 2018. Herself, her husband, her in-laws, and but 2 of her children. She has 4 children now, but 4 lovely children who you will hear in the video, because but they came with her the day that she came to do the video. And they came in on the UN refugee program. I know somebody in the migratory team at the council, and I had this idea of doing a supper club where we paid the chefs, and we then but was sold tickets, and but people paid, but general members of the public paid to come along and enjoy their food. And the lady of the council thought this was a wonderful idea. And she then said, I've also got something I'd like you to do if possible. Could you run some food hygiene courses? Because it's not just Nura and her husband that might be interested. There's loads of people who have come in on this program who would really like to set up cafes, right down to, we have a lovely Levant but sweet shop here in Edinburgh, and the 2 gentlemen that set that up became on my food hygiene course. And so we ran 2 food hygiene courses with an interpreter, worked really, really well. And then Nura and Kais, husband and wife couple, have been cooking since 2018. We used to cook for about 25 people. We now cook for 50 people, and we do it sort of kind of every second month. And we hire, the venue we hire is another social enterprise, but here in Edinburgh, that has a cafe that just runs during the daytime. So that's a whistle-stop tour through what I hope you will see on the video, as Nura talks about how she started, and also, but more importantly, but what advice she would give to other people but coming in to a new country, a new community, but with very little in the way of English, and how scared she was, but how she encourages people but just to embrace that kind of fear and to go for it, because actually you get so many rewards but from sharing your aquaculture, and it helps you to it helps to embed you in the local community.
Fantastic. Okay, Sarah, let's see if we can make the video work.
Oh, Nura, but how did you start doing the supper clubs?
Yeah. When we arrived to Edinburgh, we have a lady like
Support worker.
support worker, sorry.
No, you're
Support
fine.
worker. Yeah. When she visited us, she told me, why you don't cook like for people and that you can share your food with people. First thinking, I can't, like, it's too hard for me, and my English is not good, and I don't know how, like, and I can't cook for like 20 people. I can't. I have big family, but just like I cook for 10 people, but for 20 or 30, no. She told me just to try. I'm not thinking, it's okay. I will go and try just one time. When I try first time, I feel I'm scared and just like I can't do anything. I cook maybe food for 50, 60 people, but like a lot of food. But now I know how many I need to cook. No food remove.
Goes to waste, is that what you're trying to say? Yeah.
Just like a little bit.
A little bit left over, yeah.
Yes, left over. Yeah. And first, I don't know any like names for stuff for everything. Now I know all stuff names, and now I cook too easier before than like now.
So now I notice as well is you write the shopping list in English, whereas you never used to be able to write the shopping list in English.
Yes.
But I always get a shopping list in English now, so I don't need to do any translation.
Before I write in Arabic and in English, like 2 hours. Just I need to know how many, like for rice, for tomato, for something. But now just if you tell me like 30 people, 40 people, it's fine. Like in English, 5 minutes is done. Yeah, I'm very, very happy with cook and sharing my culture. When I see all people like my food, I'm very, very happy. And
and if you had to give somebody who is but thinking about but doing this, but what sort of advice would you give them, Nura?
Everything when you need to start, you feel is hard. Everything in the life. Just try. Just go and try. First time, second time. You will used to be you will see everything is easy, too easy. Yeah, just try and give people your culture, your ideas, your food, everything.
And excuse the background noise. And the two, no, there's nothing to be sorry, but the two kids that are in the background, yes, Adam, I can see you, but they were born here. And to start with, you used to bring them to the supper club, and they would be in their pram in the corner.
Now I have 4 kids.
Yes.
It's fine. Now I have 4 kids, but I know it's too hard with kids, with family, with schools, but it's like this. Any work like give you support to keep going with everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kids with everything.
Yeah.
Just try.
Yeah.
Try to make anything you love to make. Okay, mom.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, and little Eva's been coming to supper clubs since she was a baby as well. We used to remember popping her in the high chair in the kitchen, Nura.
Yeah.
Oh, but so it's doable though. It is perfectly doable with kids even as well. Yeah.
Now, yeah.
And I think there's one more, Sarah. Will you show the second video as well? There's a short one after this.
Yep, I'll just set that one up now.
Yes, I'm sorry. We had to stop it because we felt that the crying had got too loud and you wouldn't see it. So we had a short intermission before we started again.
Now my kids, when they see my photos or what I cook, what I do, they are very happy and like glad for me. Like with kids with schools, with like all life. Yeah, I try all time. Sometimes I'm tired or just I thinking this is like too big for me, but when I'm finished and all like it, I'm happy, and just when they say to me thank you, we love, I feel like I'm over the moon.
Well, we had a 60th birthday on Saturday, didn't we? And we've had some lovely comments. So this was a lady who had come to our supper club at the beginning of the year, and she was turning 60 this year, and she decided that she would like it as her birthday party. So we did a private one, didn't we? And everybody was dressed up in their ball gowns. We've never had people come in their ball gowns to a supper club before. But it was really good, and we've had some lovely feedback from the guests that attended, and also the birthday girl herself. So they all had a wonderful time and really enjoyed it. And it's a lot of hard work, but there's a lot of satisfaction as well when you get such lovely comments. And so many people on the night as well came up to you and said thank you so much.
Yeah. And more experience, more like active. You have chance to see another people, like meeting new friends, make really friends, like. In kitchen or outside, inside, maybe you can help someone for anything, like to do, maybe you give him idea for food, for anything. Just try.
And has it helped you feel more a part of the community in Scotland, but since you started cooking, and has it helped you to improve your English, do you think, by cooking, you know?
Yeah, I remember when I started, I used like sign language, just like, please, I need to. But now I like with the in kitchen and everything, for food, for shopping, for friends, like they give me like more. Sorry, my English.
Has it give you more confidence?
Yes. When I meet new friends and talking, now, I am like changed when I'm arrived to Scotland until now. Now I feel myself like English. Or Scottish.
Scottish.
Yes, Scottish. Like,
yes, and your children are Scottish. Yeah.
All the time I'm shy, I'm scared. No. I'm like very happy.
Yes.
Confident. Yes, yeah. Give me more energy. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Nura. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was a lovely video to share. And I guess what I'm noticing once again is the way you can use food to tackle so many other sort of personal and social issues. Just it was so clear how she's confident, she's happy, she's learnt English, she's made friends because of the support that's come in the form of your food work. Yeah, it's a really nice story, and yeah, it's very nice. And let us know. Well, let Sarah know about sharing the video because of the kids. If you just let Sarah know whether that's okay to share it, and if it's not, then of course we won't. All right, so we've got 25 minutes left. The first thing we're going to do is to break into small groups of about 5, which Sarah's going to do for us. And we'll stay in those groups for about 10-15 minutes. I'm not going to be very prescriptive about what I want you to do in those groups. I think to talk about what you're doing and to talk about what you want to do is sufficient. And then for the last 10 minutes, we'll come back. And at that time, we'll have questions for the speakers or any comments you want to share with the whole group, okay? So in a minute, if the tech works, you're going to find yourself in a group of about 5 people. They haven't got a leader each, and we're not going to ask you to report back. So you're just going to get allocated randomly, and so are the speakers. So I'll just reiterate what you might talk about when you get there. Really, you can talk about whatever you want, but as a prompt, you can talk about what you're doing and what you'd like to be doing and ask each other questions. And then automatically you'll come back into the main group after about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, any questions before you get split up? Is that okay? All right, so let's ask Sarah to press the button then, and we'll see where we end up.
Okay, just putting people into groups now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'll stay here in the main room in case anything goes wrong, and I'll leave this main room when we know everyone's happily sorted out. So you can ask a question if you get stuck in the main room. Okay, I'm going to go shortly and join the smallest group. So if you've got any questions or you're stuck and you're still in the main room, then say now before I go. Okay, I'm going, and I'll see you back in the main group later on. So welcome back, everybody. Hope you've all found your way back to the main room. We had really great people in our little group, and I guess a lot of you did too. Such a lot of expertise to share. It'd be nice to have quite a lot of people as speakers with a bit more floor time. So Sarah, I think, has picked out one question so far for speakers. If you've got any more, you can put them in the chat, and Sarah will pick them out. And after we've done that, I think there'll be time for 1 or 2 comments. And I think maybe the thing I'd like to have comments on is what we need to do next as a movement to help get this work done more effectively at a bigger scale. But you can also put in a comment to the group about anything else you'd like to say. We'll start with a question that we've got posted already. Can you tell us what the question is, Sarah?
Yes, it was from Charlie Fitzgerald. I love the recommendations, but how are you getting funding for all this? I think it was to everyone. A question to everyone, perhaps. Well, in the speaker lineup.
I did put my response in the chat and just say that it was a one-off piece of, I think it was 12 to 15,000, I can't remember now, and it was 12 to 15,000, and it was a short-term 1-year project. And that's how we were funded. But what I was saying also in the chat is that the recommendations were carried out, and they have been, because what we tried to do with the recommendations was make them really practical, things that you can actually do, because sometimes, they feel like they're unachievable, but they have already been acted. And actually, by the time we reported on it in the, some of the meetings, people have already done it. So it's wonderful that people are just moving forward. So I just think it's helpful to have practical ideas. And sharing. I don't know, because I'm also not in the food community, because it was more of a research piece for me, but I wonder how that information is shared and best practice and what good looks like.
So I think as well, just to carry out the recommendations, because I know in Stockport we have an issue with, there's lots of little pots of funding, which is all great, and even use the household support fund to fund some of that culturally appropriate food provision, but it's not sustainable, and funding and food donations have massively dropped. So it was just to hear other ideas about those sustainable funding streams to be able to carry out these recommendations, because we're having the exact same issues in the hotels as well. But we've already got, we can't, like the provision that we've got, that culturally appropriate provision, and then add in the hotels, we've got maybe like over 500 people in hotels, and we've got our existing population. So it's a lot to try and find resource and food and funding to be able to deliver it all.
I know that some of the conversations that have happened in Brighton and Hove, so there's a food network that are held by Brighton and Hove Food Partnership, and I think also they've done some action learning sets that come out of a project that I've been doing from Institute and Development Studies, and it's growing those networks so people know where they've got spare things going, so they can let people know. I think, but I know that's really obvious, sorry, but you probably already
we have one.
Yeah.
We've got a food network already of all the emergency food providers. So that's everyone from pantries, supermarkets, food banks, food delivery services, etc., etc. So, and we're set up a food partnership, but as in right across the food system. But just it's a difficult one. I guess everyone will be in the same position.
Yeah, but some of it is around social media, because I know that one of our food banks is not really saying to people when they're struggling. It's a really small conversation, and I think there was a call out if they're also doing it, and just so people can actually hear there's an issue, because people do sometimes respond.
Does someone else want to answer this question, or always another comment? Ollie's turned his camera on, but I don't know whether it's because he wants to say something or not. Trust.
Oh, I thought everyone has their camera on now.
A lot of people do, yeah, there's no pressure. There's another question coming in the chat, so we haven't got much time, so I'll go on to that one. So the question is, as a movement, how do we start to tackle or reduce the ever-increasing number of fast food shops in our communities? So I'll open that up to the whole floor if anybody wants to respond to that question.
We've been looking at that, as part of our food partnership, but we have to be very, very careful about fighting for planning applications from fast food places, because recently a council lost a court battle to it. If you've not got very good grounds to deny a planning application for a fast food store, we don't have the national policy that supports local policy for them to be able to do that. So Sustain put in they put a document together, so I can pop that in the chat around fast food takeaways and planning policy.
Well, thank you, Charlie. And if you can find Sarah's email address and send it to her by email, then we can email it out to everyone that's a bit further up the chat. That's really good. I suppose another point there is to seek to make the fast food outlets better, if they're still going to be there. What does good look like? Ollie, did you mean to put your hand up there?
Well, I was just going to ask, as an ignorant member of the public, why are fast food shops so bad that we would want to, why are they so bad that as a movement we would confront them? Just really ignorant question from me.
Okay, it's a perfectly valid question. And does anybody want to, to the whole floor, does anybody want to respond to that? Stuart, I think it's something you've spoken about in Bristol at one time. Do you want to say anything about it? Why you don't like fast food shops?
Oh, hi everyone. I cannot put my camera on for various reasons, but yeah, apologize for that. In Bristol, Somali Kitchen, we operate in Bristol, and then mainly we work with the Somali women and the migrant newly arrived people. That's one of the reasons I was silent. The thing is, majority of the migrant and newly arrived people are living in the inner city area. And what has been happening is that for the past 10, 15 years, there has been this amount of takeaway shops that has been open in our local area, which are selling really, really cheap food, deep fried chicken, something chicken, something doner. I don't even know the names of it. Honestly, it's just some sort of fast food, oil based, like very cheap, £2, £3 a meal things. And every other shop is selling that kind of, is turning that kind of business. And the majority of the people who are accessing that food are the newly arrived and the migrant people who are living in the inner city, which are Easton, Lawrence Hill, and St. Paul's. This is really very bad for the community. It's very bad for the health. We don't even know what type of food is this. This is, in terms of nutrition, it has very little nutrition or no nutrition at all. And also many young people are accessing that kind of food because it's just around the corner. It's very close to the schools. They operate, some of the shops are operating illegally in terms of how far they should be schools and children's centers and nurseries. And it's really destroying people's culture and people's health. It's a thriving business in Bristol, but that's not good for the local people. And as an immigrant, we don't understand. We think, our kids think, or our young people think this is the English food, but that's not real English food. It's a fast food type of business that's been operating mainly in Bristol. I don't know any other areas in the UK, but it seems like the council is allowing to open shops, that kind of shops, very easily in this area, compared to, for example, the better areas like Clifton, which it's really difficult for them to get access of these kind of shops. So in very close approximately of the area I live in, Eastern and Lawrence Hill and St. Paul's, you can have more than 40 or 50 shops or premises that's selling that type of food. And yeah, our initial idea to come together as a group, as Somali Kitchen women, were to tackle or raise that issue in the area. But it's not that easy, especially when English is not your first language, and we don't have that many links and contacts and to the city council and people who are giving license to these kind of shops. So I'll just end it there. But then again, instead we turn to our attention to empower the women so they can raise their voices together through food, or coming together, or or doing workshops with food. So yeah.
Thank you, Suad. That was such a good thorough answer. I think we better make that the one we conclude on, partly because it was such a great answer and partly because it's time to stop. So I just really want to thank the speakers and everyone else who's brought expertise and open minds today. That was a really nice session. Thank you very much. So we've recorded it, and unless there's any objections, we'll share it. And I guess it will be viewed quite a few more times. As I said before, if you've got any documents you want to share, you can email them to Sarah and we'll send those out as well. So that's it. We'll close. Thank you so much to the speakers, especially. Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Nice
Suresh.
to meet you all. Bye.